What's up guys, my name is Richard and today I wanted to show you guys how to rebalance with zero or little impermanent loss. And before we begin, let me show you guys my portfolio. I put my money where my mouth is, right? Right now I'm down about $23,000 on my liquidity pools because alts have been retracing quite a bit, and I'm sure if your portfolio are mostly alts like mine is, you're most likely in the red too, right? But if we look compared to holding, I'm still up because I'm beating impermanent loss. And if you look at the ETH term, I'm still up almost 3 ETH on my new positions. So I promise you guys, if you study this video, it's gonna save you a lot of headache and hopefully save you from making mistakes that will cost you a lot of your capital. So today we're going to be looking at ETH and USDC as an example. You can see here the orange bar is where my ranges were, around $24.75 and $5,000, and $36.79, the green line, is where my entry was. So not a great entry at all, right? If my goal is to get more USDC, but it's a rebalanced position, not really my actual entry. But you can see clearly my position dropped out of range, so all my USDC in the position has been turned to ETH. Before I even think about rebalancing, I want to ask a few key questions. Number one, has any fundamentals changed with the assets in the pool? So in this case, I had ETH and USDC, right? Like if ETH has been hacked, or there's like a USDC depegged, or suddenly something wild happens like the US government decided to ban ETH, and this could possibly affect my analysis and what I decide to do, right? But if it's just a market downturn, which is what it seems like right now, I'm most likely betting on ETH pumping back into range or getting back near my entry. So this brings me to my second question, is if the asset is gonna recover and get back near or to my entry. So if you guys know about impermanent loss, is basically if the price rises back to my entry with zero rebalancing, then basically I lose $0 to impermanent loss. I have a more detailed video on impermanent loss on my channel, so be sure to check that out. But if I'm reasonably certain that like the price is gonna recover back here or even pump above, right? And my goal is still to sell ETH into USDC while earning some fees, then it makes sense for me to hold the position or rebalance the position with the same exact assets. And lastly, you just want to check if you're acting based on fear. Like if you're panicking and you're trying to rebalance because you missed out on fees and you're in negative dollar value, right? Then you might want to take a few days or a week off before you make any important decisions. So the first strategy is just to wait 24 to 48 hours or longer if you believe that the price is gonna pump back into range. So if you go back here in August, you can see ETH kind of pops in and out of my position, and eventually it pops back into range and even came back to my entry. So in that case, I didn't really have to worry much about rebalancing because it's kind of moving in and out of my range, and I'm comfortable just not incurring any additional impermanent loss. So first option is just to wait, and the second option is called a Snuggle rebalance. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to make as little swap as possible and drag the bottom range down here. So you'll get less fees because you expanded your range, right? But each time you're forced to do this, you basically have a wider and wider range and there's less need to rebalance. But if you don't drag the upper range, you'll still incur some impermanent loss, and we'll run through the simulator to show you why. So this is the original position I had. I'm just putting $10,000 as an easy number to look at. So the current price, let's say, is around $2,100, right? The minimum $24.75, the max is $5,000. And if I hit simulate position performance, I set the ETH price to near what I had for my entry, and you can see on strategy B is the asset I would have at that ETH price. So I would have around 15,586. So this number is important to jot down and keep in mind. And we're gonna run through the simulation, same exact thing. Calculation price around 2100, but now I'm adjusting my minimum price to 2103. My max price is again 5,000. So here you can see I'm getting around 52% APR. If I hit simulate position performance, ETH price is $36.79. you can see my LP position, if it pumps back to 36.79, right? It's only worth 14,525. So I did a Snuggle rebalance, but I'm still incurring about $1,000 in impermanent loss, right? If we hop back to the original range we had, the value would have been 15,586. So $1,000 difference, pretty big difference, right? And you can see if the APR stays the same, it takes me about like 2 months, 2.5 months to make up for it, right? Because monthly fee is around like 400 something dollars per my $10,000. So now what you could do is slowly adjust your max price up. Let's say I put it at 7,000, right? I go back to hit simulate position performance. Again, the ETH price is at 36.79 to simulate if ETH recovers to my entry price. My LP would now be worth 15,184. This happens because if you drag down the bottom range, right, without dragging the upper range, you're basically getting a worse average sale price when ETH pumps against USDC, right? Versus if I drag down the bottom range and then I expand the top range, I'm getting a better average price. But again, you're getting a bit less fees for that. So 15,184 versus 15,586 of what we had. If you look at the difference, that's about $400. But if you look at my monthly fee, it dropped from like 400 something dollars that we just looked at to 336. So it takes me now about a month and a half to make up the impermanent loss. So not nearly as much as before where it's like 2 something months, right? And now if we increase the max price to, let's say, 10,000, we hit simulate position performance. Now we're looking at if ETH recovers to my price, right? 15,565 compared to what we had, 15,586. So that's only 20 something dollars, very small, don't need to worry about it. It's gonna take me only like 2-3 days to cover that impermanent loss. And it makes much more sense to do this if you guys expect, for example, ETH to recover in price in like 2 or 3 months, right? Not like a year. It might be better to not drag the top range if you believe like ETH is gonna grind down here for like 2 or 3 years, right? Before it recovers. But one thing to keep in mind is if ETH, let's say, recovers to only 3,000, my new position would be worth 13,562. And if we go back to the original position, right, with that same range, 2475 and 5,000, we hit simulate 3,000, so 13,860. So this is the original position with the tighter range, right? I would have 13,860 versus the new one, I would have 13,562. So about $300 difference. You're still incurring some impermanent loss if the price doesn't recover all the way to your entry price. But again, $300 is not too bad. The monthly is only $280, right? So it takes me like 1 month to cover the impermanent loss if ETH recovers to 3,000. And lastly, you could go to the extreme, right? If you care a lot about impermanent loss, and it makes a lot of sense to do this if you expect like ETH to recover pretty rapidly, right? Let's say I set the max range to basically infinity, add a bunch of zero, right? My APR is about 18 something percent. It's better than the full range because you're providing one-sided liquidity. But if I click simulate position performance at 3,000, I would have about 13,882. Compared to what we had before, 13,860. So about $22 extra, I actually gain a little bit of money as ETH recovers, right? So this is the way to do it. If like ETH drops a lot in price, let's say ETH drops to $1,500, you want as little impermanent loss as possible without switching the pools, right? Because when you do this, you're getting a much better average sell price for your ETH when ETH recovers. And you might be looking at the APR and say like, oh, it's only 18% APR. I mean, 18% is better than like most investment you're going to find in the traditional market. And you're getting basically no impermanent loss, right? If your goal is to have as little impermanent loss as possible. But instead of going to extreme, I usually just go to, let's say, like 10,000 or something, right? I'm still getting 34% APR, and it's not a big deal if ETH, like, doesn't reach back to my entry, stays at 3,000, right? It's fine. I still can cover that amount in like 1 month and something. So that's an in-depth view of the Snuggle rebalance. And then the last thing you can do is to rotate your ETH into other plays. You could use your ETH, for example, to lend out or swap to wrap stake ETH to gain some yield. Or what I did was create a new Sol ETH position. So basically this was the position that I told you guys about, right? The minimum 24.75, the max was like 5,000. I invested about 40,000 something dollars, but I netted a profit of like 3.7 something ETH more than when I deposited. Again, the US dollar value is down because, ETH has dropped from like 36.79 near my entry all the way to like $2,100, right? Like a maybe 40% retrace. So then I rotated to this ETH and Sol position, and it's doing pretty well right now. If you look at the ETH terms, I have like 0.173 ETH uncollected, right? I've only been in position for like 11 days. The price is above my entry, so I have positive ETH divergence loss. And basically I keep my liquidity in this pool and keep stacking ETH until I feel like, okay, the market is a little bit overheated. I want to sell some of my ETH, or I want to rotate back to the ETH and USDC pool. So that's one way, right? You rotate your ETH into something like ETH and Sol or ETH and BTC to keep stacking some blue chips while ETH recover. And then assuming you have a net positive ETH gain, you could always rotate back to the ETH and USDC pool later. But that's another topic for another video. It's gonna get too long if I go into like strategies to try to stack more ETH. So just to recap, guys, there's 3 main strategies. Number 1 is to just let your position sit if you believe that the position is gonna be back into range in a short term, right? And then number 2 is you snuggle rebalance. You drag down the bottom range and you try to see like how far you need to drag up the upper range, right? And basically you'll be in range when the price recovers a little bit. And number 3 is just rotating into other plays like I did with ETH and Sol. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos. There's a lot of videos that help you make more money from DeFi, specifically yield farming through liquidity pools. And there's also a lot of videos that's gonna help you preserve your capital, prevent you from making the same mistakes I did. I'll catch you guys in the next video.